Hello everyone, this is Peggy. Welcome to today's show. Today we have a great honor to invite Captain Reyes and Sergeant Liu to join us. So can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Me first, yes. So
Sure.
again, my name is Mark Reyes. I am the captain of Temple Sheriff Station, which is located in Temple City, California, not too far from where we're at today. It is a 66 square mile jurisdiction. We have 5 contract cities that are Temple City, Rosemead, South El Monte, Duarte, Bradbury, and then several of the unincorporated areas, East Pasadena, North San Gabriel, South San Gabriel, and then Monrovia, Arcadia, and the Duarte areas. So we encompass a very large jurisdiction. And the station is located at the corner of Rosemead Boulevard and Las Tunas in Temple City.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm Sergeant Liu, Aaron Liu, and I'm a patrol sergeant. Usually you're going to see me on the street a lot.
So welcome you two to join us again. So let's just get into our topic.
Okay.
So as you know, the most concerned topic in our Asian community is safety. So we chose to live in San Gabriel Valley because it is considered one of the safest area to live in the country. However, the fact that recent armed home invasions seem to target our Asian Americans, actually that scared community. So under this circumstance, can you give us some advice on how to protect ourselves?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, I too have lived nearly my entire life in the San Gabriel Valley. So
Right.
I still believe that it is considered one of the safest areas in Los Angeles County to this day. That being said, anyone is subject to being a victim at any time.
Right.
Rich, poor, middle class, it doesn't matter. So the things that we can do to protect ourselves is some of the things that we in law enforcement do because we know, right? So number one is you got to be vigilant. You got to be aware of your surroundings. Know who's around you. Know, especially if you're home, you have to know your neighbors. Know what kind of cars they drive. If something looks suspicious, you have to have the fortitude to be able to pick up your phone and call 911.
Right.
That's the only way to get us there. And language barrier should never be an issue because we have the ability to translate in many different dialects. And we even have people at our dispatch centers that speak many of the Asian dialects. So surveillance cameras are a great technology today. I use them myself. In my own home, I have cameras everywhere. You're not going to get on my property without being recorded. And so you got to use your cameras. If you're able to, get yourself a dog. Sergeant Liu and I were talking earlier about I have a dog in my backyard. You're not getting in my backyard.
Right.
And not only is my dog going to bark, he may bite you, but you're also going to be on camera, right? So get a dog. You know, a lot of people today are buying firearms to protect themselves at home, and you know that's another option. There's a lot of responsibility with that, and I think probably your questions will get into that later.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Definitely. Well, yeah, so I really appreciate how you mentioned the language barrier is not a problem anymore. Because to be honest, like many of my fellows, it might be hard for them to like say English about what they're incurring. And as you mentioned, the surveillance camera, I was also wondering how those footage or how those images are going to help the police to kind of like fight with the criminal scene.
So sometimes the images captured of a suspect are so unique that we can identify somebody
Right.
based on the clothing they're wearing. Maybe a vehicle is captured. We also have technology that's called facial recognition, where a computer technology will pick up features of your face and say, hey, that's Mark Reyes, right?
Wow.
And so it's a great database and it's a tool that's available, but without good video, it's useless. So I know we've come across several instances where a victim has cameras, but they're not connected. What is the point of having a camera
Exactly.
if they're not going to be connected? And then you got to subscribe to the recording technology. For instance, Ring Ring camera, ring.com. I'm not advocating them, but that's just, they have a feature you pay extra and then you can record your video for future viewing, and you can give it to the police, and that's how our detectives use that often to solve crimes.
Appreciate it. And yes, so in terms of the firearms you mentioned before, I was also wondering, so it seems like the using firearms can be a very effective method. So what do you think, or how can we properly using the firearms to protect ourselves?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it is a big debate. It's a personal choice that someone has to make. Obviously, we in law enforcement, we carry weapons, so it's second nature to us.
Right.
But a lot of non-law enforcement carry guns on their property, and you have to you have to understand the laws. Again, with self-defense, you have to understand it's not just I have a gun. What about the aftermath if you use it?
Exactly.
You know, even us when we're involved in shootings, it is very stressful. Even though that's part of our responsibility, we may have to do that. It is very stressful. So can you imagine now a citizen who's not in law enforcement buys a gun, he or she buys a gun and then uses it, probably for the right reason, but now they're going through all kinds of issues because you're going to have to be interviewed. There might be courtroom litigation. There may be criminal, civil penalties. You might get sued. Even though you do things right, you're going to get sued. So there's a lot of things to consider. Not only that, firearm proficiency. You got to practice, right? But, you know, for those that were alive during the Rodney King riots, I can remember, you know, the police were overwhelmed and people were having to resort to taking care of their own property. And I don't know if you remember, there was liquor store owners that were on rooftops with firearms protecting their own property.
Yes.
Right? And that worked. That worked. So firearms are a great tool if you know how to use them and you're responsible enough to get the proper training. The other thing is, where do you leave your firearm when you're not needing it, when you don't use it? Because kids get their hands on it. Or what about a couple in a heated argument? There's a gun readily available, and in the heat of the moment, are you going to grab that gun and use it on your spouse? That does happen. So a lot of things to consider. It's not just let's buy a firearm and use it, because a firearm in the wrong hands could create bad problems for people.
Exactly. I like how you mentioned about the firearms can be can play as a different role if you didn't use it right.
Right.
So I'd like to go deeper into that topic. So for example, how do we consider as a law for defense? Because as I know, just in the city of Walnut, the owner of the house who killed an invader in order to defend himself. So how do you say that's a law for self-defense?
So self-defense is the same for you or I. Just because I'm a cop, I have the same standard. I can only use a firearm to protect my life or that of someone else. And so can you. If you have a legal firearm, you can do the same thing.
Right.
So you have to understand, when does that happen? In the heat of a moment, when things are happening in a split second, rapidly evolving, tense, uncertain, your stress kicks in. When can I pull that trigger?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So it has to be in defense of your life or someone else's life, or great bodily injury. Like if somebody's coming with an axe and they're trying to cut your arm off, you can use a firearm to defend yourself in that situation. So, you know, there are classes that you can take. In fact, I believe Sheriff Villanueva, in his CCW, carry concealed weapons permits that he's given out since he took office, in order to get that CCW permit, you're required to take a gun safety class. And I believe they discuss those kind of topics. And most gun stores will probably guide you in the right direction to get those kind of classes.
Okay, yeah. So it's definitely very necessary to take those classes
Absolutely.
before actually possessing a gun.
Yes, 100%.
Sure. And well, thanks for the information. Really appreciate it. And also, we were wondering, what is the law enforcement response procedure? Can we like have a general idea? Like, for example, I know the incident that occurred on August 28th in the city of Temple City. There's some, so we were wondering what the deputies do when they respond to the location.
I assume you're referring to the home invasion?
Right.
So generally, a home invasion robbery, that's going to come in via our emergency 911 system. Deputies are going to respond with lights and siren to the location. If the suspects are already gone, we're going to tend to any potential victims, put out a crime broadcast so that we could start looking for suspects if we know who they are. Right. Sometimes victims are blindfolded, they don't even know who they are, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're going to get a lot of response from law enforcement. You're going to get the deputies, you're going to get a sergeant, and then once the situation is secure and the deputies understand what they have, we're going to call the crime lab. Mm-hmm. The crime lab is civilian employees who, kind of like CSI, they look for evidence, mm-hmm. dust for prints, DNA, take photographs, all that kind of type of stuff. And it's going to generate a response from my detectives, be it the detectives, the detective sergeant, sometimes my detective lieutenant, are going to come out. And we're going to take it a step further. The case in Temple City, our detectives went out to the location, processed the scene, did some interviews, and then at a later time it was determined that our Major Crimes Bureau should be the ones to handle that. So Major Crimes Bureau is part of our detective division, located outside of the station, and they specialize in these types of violent felonies like home invasion robberies. So you're going to get a lot of response.
Explain to what my captain just mentioned about crime broadcast. Crime broadcast is law enforcement use after emergency situation when we responded to the first scene. Crime broadcasts usually include the suspect description. For example, when you are, I'm the first responder. When I go into the scene, I interview the victims. The victims are going to give me some description of the suspects. For example, the race, the height, the clothing, and what type of car they're driving. Those are super important informations for us. Once we get those information collected, we're going to broadcast through our radio system. So the whole county are looking for those, and including our Aero Bureau and all the deputies on the streets throughout the county are looking for those descriptions. Describe the suspects. So that will say like the descriptions of the suspects are very, very important.
Absolutely. Clothing description and race for sure.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate how detailed you provide for us and our audiences. And in terms of like those informations, we were also wondering, I assume that some information can be confidential. So is there anything that like you can tell the media or you can't?
So in the Temple City case that happened a couple weeks ago, we did go to the media and we put out what we could put out. Now you got to keep in mind, I think you're already onto it. Mm-hmm. We release too much information. We also give the information to the suspects, right?
Yes.
Or sometimes too much information can skew a witness's perception of what they saw because they hear something and now they're trying to match what they saw based on what they're hearing on the news. And we don't want to give up our investigation. And that, in the case in Temple City, last I heard, the last update I got was we've already made 2 arrests.
Oh, okay.
And so I'd like to add that incident in Temple City is not a typical home invasion robbery where it was a random act. They just went into a house for whatever reason.
Right.
Without getting into the specifics, there was some suspicious circumstances that our detectives were able to identify that led us to believe that this was a targeted location because of a relationship between the victim and the suspects.
I see.
So hopefully that'll ease the mind of my Temple City residents who are concerned, like, man, could this happen to me?
Right.
And although it could happen to any one of us,
That's true.
the reality is, in this particular case, there's nothing to believe that it's random, and you gotta be careful because it could happen to you. You know, so I hope that eases the minds of a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Sure. Besides the thing that happens in the city of Temple City, I heard there in the San Gabriel Valley, there's someone like once broke into the house and actually waiting for the owner to come back. Yeah, like some of the audience, they just expressed their concern about this. So we were wondering, is the police doing something or anything to reduce the crime like this?
Listen, so that's a great question. We're always doing something to prevent crime. Unfortunately, we can only work with what we have, right?
Right.
So this is a multi-part question or answer, because number one, if you had an alarm system on your house and video cameras, there is no way someone's going to break into your home and you not know about it. You can't break into my house and I won't know about it.
Yes.
Because I have an alarm.
Right.
And all my perimeter is covered. Some people may call it paranoid. I call it being aware, right? So that's one thing you can do. Going back to the police, you know, we need more. And I know for a time there was a narrative saying, let's defund the police. But I can tell you, in my communities, nobody wants to defund the police, especially the Asian community. The Asian community wants more police, and so do I. So do the deputies, because robberies don't happen when let me give you an example. When a deputy sheriff is at 7-Eleven, that 7-Eleven does not get robbed. Never.
Never?
It never happens. You don't rob a 7-Eleven while there's a deputy there. And I say that to say that when cops are in an area,
Yes.
things don't happen. It's when they leave or when they're not there that things happen, right?
Yeah, I get it, yeah.
So that alone is proof that, you know, just by us driving around prevents crimes. They see a lot of cops in the area. If some crook is thinking of committing a robbery, hey, you know what, it's hot right here. There's too many cops. Let's wait, or let's go somewhere else, or let's not do it. So we're always on patrol. I'm, Temple Station, I always like to brag that we lead the division in arrests. Our deputies are out there working very, very hard, trying to take people to jail. And we could go on to, we take people to jail, but we can't keep them in jail because of our current policies and the DA's office and our laws. So that people don't stay in jail. There's very little repercussions for misdemeanors nowadays. So there's a lot more bad people out in the street where they otherwise would be in jail. I'll give you another example. I can recall when I've been on the department for over 32 years, a time when the Los Angeles County jail system housed over 22,000 inmates. Today, we have 14,000, 14 plus. So where is those 8,000 criminals that used to be in the jails? They're roaming your streets, our streets, everyone else's streets, right? So, essentially our laws in California make drugs non-criminal. You know, there's no teeth to the laws anymore. We can't do anything. We can't put them in diversion. We can't put them in drug programs to help them get off drugs. So that's where you see these crimes happening as well. Because I'm kind of getting off down the rabbit hole, but there's just so much to it. Definitely. Drug addicts don't work 9 to 5 to support their drug habit. They don't work at all. They steal from you and me to support their drug habit. Right? So that's why we got those types of crimes.
Totally. Yeah, I just got resonated with the captain, what he said about seeing a cop on the street. Like, it definitely makes me like myself feel safer when I see I was being like protected in some way. And I also appreciate how you mentioned about the Asian community, because most of our audience, they're Asian Americans. So I was wondering, just like, do you have like, what's the impression for you like towards the Asian community, or is there anything you think we are lack of, we need to be improved in terms of like the self-defense?
So I think, first of all, my impression of the Asian community, which I've gotten to know a lot better as being the captain. I'm almost going on 2 years as the captain. It's a culture that's very quiet, very keep to themselves.
Yes.
But at the same time, very conservative. But, you know, I think I shared this with Sergeant Liu one time. There was times, I used to be the watch commander at Temple Station as a lieutenant. So I worked there back in 2014, and I can remember the Asian media calling me at the station, and they're saying, "Hey, we heard there was a robbery at Walk and Don't Walk." Yes, there was. Can you tell me if the victims or the suspect were Asian? And if the answer was no, okay, thank you, and they'd hang up. They wouldn't care. They would not care to put that on the news. But me personally, I want to know about every single crime in my area. I don't care about the race. I want to know my neighborhood, what is going on in my neighborhood, because that helps me better protect myself.
Exactly.
Right? If there's a guy that's robbing people when they go on a jog of their cell phones, I want to know. Right?
Yeah,
because now I'm going to go a different route, or I'm not going to take my cell phone or whatever. Regardless of the race. So I don't know if that still happens today. Maybe Aaron could
explain. It happened on August 28th. My phone was blown off because the home invasion. I'm sure that the whole the media knows my number and just call me. But the first question I ask is always, "Are they Asian?" And after you say, "Okay, they're Asian," then they are following questions. If the answer is, "Oh no, they're not Asian," then okay, click. So, well, that's why the fear coming from our Asian community is, you know, home invasion and robbery happens, right? It happens to anybody. But our Asian only hear those happens to Asian. So once, twice, and third times when the things happen to Asian, then we came to the theory that it's targeting Asian community. We don't have that evidence that it's targeting Asian community. It happens everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So that's, I mean, that's a very informative speaking or conversation. And I would say that's all the question I have. But if you have anything you want to speak to our audiences, feel free to.
You know, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to the community. I'm speaking to you, but hopefully the message is really for the community. In Temple City and Rosemead, and, you know, where I have a large Asian population. And, you know, I've said it probably 50 times, I'll say it again. Please call the sheriff's station. Morale is good at the station because the deputies are supported. They want to work, which is evident by having the highest arrest stats in our division. So give us the information. Let us decipher it, even if you're wrong. I'll give you one last example.
Sure.
I responded to a call in Temple City, and this is a while ago, where there was a burglary. It was a home of a Chinese couple who were in China. They were not home.
Right.
Their home got burglarized. The neighbor, who was also Asian, said, yeah, I saw some black guys go into their house. And I said, well, why didn't you call? She says, well, I didn't know if they had called them for something. And she's like, to be honest with you, I didn't want to sound racist. I'm like, you know your neighbor is Chinese. They're in China. You see black males going into a home. Even if you're wrong, at the very least, call us so we could look at it. Maybe they were there for something legitimate. In this case, they weren't. They burglarized a home and took a lot of property. but she was afraid to call because she didn't want to be labeled as a racist. There's nothing racist about that. It doesn't matter the race of a suspect. We have Asian suspects, Hispanic suspects, white suspects. All races commit crimes.
Right.
So get involved. I encourage the public to follow us on our social media. Temple Station has a Twitter account, Facebook account, and Instagram. We put out community messages there all the time. So, please follow us if they can. That would be great. And, I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I think now, like for example, this week, I'm very happy to see when the neighbor calls something suspicious on the driveway or on their neighbor's backyard. So I'm very happy to see those calls coming in because you're watching out for each other. You're looking out for your neighbors. So that helps us too. You can do your part to help us, to help everybody to prevent home invasion.
Definitely. I think just like the captain and the surgeon mentioned, just don't hesitate to call, even if you think that's wrong. That's a very, how do you say?
Naive way to think. Yeah.
Right.
Don't be afraid to talk to us. We are your friends.
Yeah.
I'd like to add one other thing.
Yes, please.
At Temple Station, and maybe Aaron Lou could attest to this, we have a large number of Asian deputy sheriffs at my station. I think we have the most.
Wow.
Would you agree?
We do.
We have the most, more than a Walnut Station, more than an industry station. And so they're coming here more and more and to my station, and we got all these deputies that speak a bunch of different dialects, and it's really great because it works well for my community. I got Sergeant Lou here, and she speaks the language, and she's able to interact with the community that we otherwise would have trouble doing it. So.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that's a very important message that can be delivered to our audiences. And I think everyone can just witness how professional and responsible our police station is. So, thank you again for joining us.
Absolutely.
And it's a great pleasure to speak to you both.
Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now that comes to the end of our show. Thank you again for watching, and we are looking forward to seeing you next time.